Hello everyone and welcome to this EREMA webinar. Today we are going to talk about how to professionally navigate the post-deployment reintegration process. But before I start with my story or presentation about reintegration, I want to ask you one thing. During this presentation, if you went already on a deployment and returned back home, I want you to think about your own experiences. How you experienced it, what were the things that helped you, what were the things that challenged you, and so on. And if you had already colleagues who went on deployment and came back home, I want to think about how you experienced their return home, what you do to help them, were there specific elements, and so on. Because I think during my presentation, there will be a lot of things that you will recognize and also a lot of things that you can take home with you to help your colleagues as a supervisor to help people return back home. A little bit more information about my research and the team that I'm working with. So I am doing my PhD about the topic of reintegration. And I'm doing that together with Lieutenant Colonel Lobé at the Royal Military Academy, but also with Professor Uwema at the KU Leuven. And today we are going to talk about, first of all, we will define what is reintegration. Next, we will zoom into a mixed design study, our second study. We will discuss the results, and then later on we will see what's in the future. And there is always at the end room for questions. So as you all may know, a soldier typically goes through a deployment cycle with 5 different phases. And at each phase of their deployment, employees are likely to face challenges that can impact their performance, their motivation, and their well-being. Therefore, it's crucial that each phase and its challenges are well studied and documented, and that the interventions are based on this information. However, while the challenges experienced at the pre-deployment phase and the deployment phase are well studied and well understood, the post-deployment phase has been neglected both in the literature and even sometimes in organizational policies. However, reintegration is not easy. Soldiers need to switch back from the deployment setting to their home life, and this can be a very big difference. And also during this transition, they can face challenges, but also happy moments, such as, for example, the typical homecoming, but they are also confronted with challenges that can affect their well-being, their motivation, and their performance, because they need to renegotiate different roles, different identities. They need to merge what they have experienced during the deployment with their life back home. So what is reintegration? The official definition that we use is reintegration is a process of resuming roles in the family, the community, and the workplace, which may be influenced at different levels of a social ecological framework. So we place reintegration in a multidimensional framework with 3 main dimensions: the individual, the interpersonal, and the professional, which can enhance or inhibit the reintegration process. Based on an extensive reintegration systematic literature review, we identified different challenges of these dimensions. I don't have the time today to really zoom in into the different challenges. However, I will highlight the main characteristics of the reintegration process of this framework. So first of all, as I already mentioned, we see reintegration as a multidimensional. That means that each dimension plays a very important role. So the family, the friends, the individual that's returning home, but also the colleagues, the supervisor, and the organization, they all have a very specific influence on the reintegration process. So they all have a responsibility to make sure that reintegration is successful. Next, it is also dual, which means that during this process of returning back home, they can experience positive and negative experiences at the same time. Thus, the typical view of returning back home, having post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and that's the only outcome that we will research, that's not the case. We really see that reintegration, we can have both positive experiences. For example, I'm very happy to be back with my family, but at the same time, I am struggling with taking up my role again as a father or a mother. And lastly, it's also dynamic, which means that challenges of one dimension or within one challenge can influence another dimension. So for example, when you're returning back home and you have some difficulty with connecting again with your family, with your children, and you have some frustration about that, and you go to the workplace, those frustrations can come to the workplace, and you can, for example, be annoyed at your colleagues and so on. But it can also be the other way around. But we also identified a gap because in this review, we also saw that only 8 studies of the 105 that we included focused on professional reintegration. So that is really a gap that we decided to research. And when we speak about professional reintegration, we talk about the resumption of various work-related roles in the organization after deployment. And thus, that's why we decided to do a mixed design study. First of all, I also want, I already talked a little bit about the other research, but so we did already 2 studies. The first was a systematic literature review, where we really focused just on what is reintegration and what are the different dimensions. And then based on the gap that we identified, we decided to do a mixed design study with interviews where we asked how was your return back home, and we had a specific focus on the professional reintegration. And the results that I'm going to talk about today, they are mostly from the mixed design study, but they are also reflected in the systematic literature review. So as a repetition, we did a mixed design study where we sent a questionnaire to the employees who volunteered, where we asked about their integration experiences on the different dimensions and the positive and the negative aspects. And later on, we invited them for an interview where we asked, how was your return back home? And we had a specific focus on the professional reintegration and the policy, the HR policy, with questions about their experiences, their challenges, and their specific needs. And in total, we interviewed 30 people, with 18 from the military defense and 12 from the non-governmental organizations, because we decided to focus on both sectors. So let's talk about the results. First of all, we looked at the quantitative results, and we looked if we could see differences between the positive and the negative experiences based on the questionnaire. And we see that both can coexist. So in general, they have positive experiences, but also negative experiences. But we see that the negative experiences are lower than the positive ones. We also did a paired sample t-test, and we saw that there was a significant difference between the positive and the negative experiences. So our participants significantly scored higher on the positive elements than the negative ones. So this is, for example, this is first a good indication of they both coexist, but it's also a good indication that it's not only negative, and in comparison, it's often more positive than negative. Then we also looked if we could identify different groups based on the quantitative results, and indeed we identified 4 different groups. First of all, we had the all was well, with high scores on the positive aspects and low scores on the negative aspects of reintegration. Then we had the mixed feelings, where they still had high scores on the positive subdimensions, but also high scores on the negative dimensions. And then we had the all was well except for the family, where they had high scores on the positive dimensions, but they also scored higher on the negative interpersonal dimension. And finally, we had the group all was well except for work, where we saw comparable to the all was well except for family, high positive scores, but also a high score on the negative professional dimension. And this is really interesting because we we took those groups into our qualitative analysis, and there we could really identify the risk and the benefits of successful reintegration based on the experiences of those groups. So now let's zoom in onto the qualitative results. We will here have a specific focus about professional reintegration because the time is limited. And we will focus on return to work, the influence of the deployment unit, the colleagues and the supervisors, and of course, the organization and the culture. One thing that was really striking, that even though we didn't ask specific questions about the deployments, soldiers and our participants often started their story with explaining what they experienced during the deployment and the influence on the reintegration process. The main factors that we identified were the level of cultural adjustment and thus also the level of culture shock, the familiarity with the host country, the intensity of the deployment, the duration. So longer deployments were more intensive and were more difficult to reintegrate. And also if they had a future deployment in the near future, to see this could also influence in the way that they reintegrated. Next, we asked about their professional return, how they experienced coming back to their unit, to their workplace, to their regular job. And when military personnel returned back to the workplace, they encountered an initial feeling of boredom. They had the feeling that they were more important during the deployment and they could contribute more there. And here we can see two quotes. So I will always use sometimes quotes to illustrate really the feelings of our participants. And you really see that they sometimes had the feeling of that their responsibilities carried less significance, that they had some difficulty to getting back into the routine of getting up again, sitting in traffic, and so on. But how this sensation gradually diminishes as familiarity with day-to-day work rhythm was regained. And also within the military, soldiers often face additional challenges due to the staff shortages. So when they come back home, they can face altered circumstances, additional responsibilities. So this can be really a challenge. However, they also indicate that going on a mission is very good for their career and future promotions. Next, what is the role of the colleagues, the deployment unit, and the supervisors? Based on the interview, we see that there are two elements that really mattered, and that's interest and support. And now we will zoom in more on those aspects, on the deployment unit and the colleagues more specific. In general, for our participants, it was easier to discuss their experiences with colleagues or with their deployment unit because there's really no need to elaborate on the mission context. Because often with family and friends, they ask stupid questions or have stupid responses, and it can be really a challenge and even sometimes a frustration. So here you can see that this participant also said, like, I like it more because it's more an eye-to-eye conversation with each other. However, there are some additional challenges and requirements. First of all, you have the challenge of the familiar or unfamiliar deployment units. And this will determine how easy it is to stay in touch and how easy it is to receive this support. And for the colleagues back home, it's very important to show genuine interest and have an atmosphere of mutual trust and respect. So this means no competitive atmosphere, because often, especially with individual augmentees, when just one person goes to on deployment and comes back home, there is a competitive atmosphere of I can do it better next time when I am going, and then the support that you offer is not really genuine and it will miss its goal. Then for the supervisors, they are first of all responsible for showing and giving support. So they are responsible for monitoring and the physical and mental well-being of their employees, and also providing the necessary information and even sometimes intervene, even if they are not deployed with the individual. And next of all, it's also showing interest in experiences in the new acquired skills and how they can incorporate them in the future. And it's a form of recognition also for the performed efforts. Then for the role of the organization, we already saw that with the peers, that interest and support are quite important. And this role is also, those main elements is also reflected. So first of all, interest is initial step to show recognition and support. And you can show interest in the deployment experiences, but also in the well-being during the reintegration process. If you not show interest, you cannot show adequate recognition and support because you will not know how your employees are doing, and so you will not know how to answer properly. So the next two steps are support and recognition. But there is also the additional requirement that we need to change the crisis service culture or the military culture. Because we need to, there is at this moment often the general assumption that people who are working in the military are tough people, tough men and women. They can handle themselves. There is no need to share problems or mental health issues because also it's sometimes not accepted. However, just as physical health is very important, mental health is also very important. So here we need really a change in culture. We also asked about the role of HR policies and more specific about the current HR policy and the policy that they wished. And we see here in the current policy that there is really a gap between the intent that the policymakers have and the perception that the common soldier has of the support or the interest that is provided. There is an emphasis on own initiative, so there is no systematic proactivity. And also there is sometimes quite often a high level of distrust and stigma that they have to experience that if they will share that they are struggling with the reintegration, that it will have an impact on their career or future promotions. Now, we also asked what was some golden tips or the wished policy that they had. And first of all, the main requirement is systematic proactivity. So the organization or the military needs to show that they care. We need to change the culture so that talking about your well-being is also accepted. And the main suggestion or golden tip that came was to just have a contact moment with a psychologist, with a social service person, to really just talk about how was your deployment, how are you doing, and just a person who is showing genuine interest and just have a conversation, just like you have your medical checkups, you have a conversation with a psychologist after you return back home. Here again, you have an illustration of a participant who talked about it, and he said, like, look, if you are struggling and you have the feeling that the military is not showing interest, then you get very frustrated and you're kind of angry about at your employer. But then if the defense asks, how are you? Then you will be angry, then you are emotional, but later on you will be relieved and you will have the feeling that you are supported and that the military is showing interest in you. So to conclude, first of all, at individual return level at the workplace, they are really struggling with the level of impact and decision making back home. Additionally, they have extra responsibilities and altered circumstances. And also there is a need for the recognition for new acquired skills that they can use in the workplace. For the peers, so the deployment unit, the colleagues, and the supervisors, they are very important informal support systems. However, you need to show genuine interest as a main base, and there needs to be mutual trust and respect, so no competitive atmosphere. And then finally, for the military or for the organization, interest is an initial step for support and recognition, as I already mentioned, and there's very much a need for proactivity from the military to returning employees, and maybe we should require or consider to change the culture where emotional well-being is as important as physical well-being. And now to come back to the question that I asked in the beginning, to think about your own reintegration experiences or how you could help your employee or your soldier or your colleagues, my main suggestion would be to just ask very simple, how are you? And if you ask this question when you have the time to also receive the response, then you can have a genuine conversation, and you can also offer the support that's needed by just asking one simple question, how are you? So what's next after those interviews? Currently, we are conducting our third study, where we go to the different units who went on a deployment to Romania or Lithuania. And when they return back to their workplace, we ask them to fill in a questionnaire that is measuring several reintegration indicators, as I already mentioned, for example, the different dimensions and the positive and the negative aspects. But on the other side, we are also measuring different professional and well-being outcomes to really gather all the information on how our current military is doing, and to really provide concrete action points to our military. So that was it. I hope you all enjoyed this short introduction about the reintegration process. If you have any other questions, you can always ask them now. If you need to leave, that's perfectly fine. Then you can always email me. I'm always happy to answer your questions or to assist anywhere where possible. And then I only have the last thing to say is thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. And for the rest, have a good day. Thank you so much.